It's interesting. My grandfather was in the military for 30 plus years, and I do believe that because of his military experience and being in the military, he raised my mother and my aunts to just kind of fall in line, you know, fortunately, but unfortunately, because that does sometimes cause a lot of problems when you when that starts to trickle down to the grandkids and the grandchildren, because there's this mindset of inferiority that sets in based off of that.
How my family intersects directly with the American dream is I have relatives in my family that took on that entrepreneurial spirit, even amongst extreme adversity, and were able to thrive and provide for their families. And that's the true American dream, being able to do that. And if we can do that, and the stories that I'm hearing about my own family and how they've gone through all this adversity and still were able to do this, it really is inspiring to know that it can still be relative today. So their stories of the past is definitely relative today. When I think about my version of the American dream, we all had the same dream, even though we're centuries later, and we still have that American dream.
I mean, I said I think that every immigrant story intersects with the American dream, because I assume most immigrants are coming here to achieve the American dream. But I also think that probably my grandmother's my dad's mom is going to be the most American dream-like. She escaped Nazi persecution. Much of her family was killed during the Holocaust. And she raised my dad. He was an only child. They were very, very poor, but she raised him. He became really successful. He was super intelligent, raised a bunch of mostly intelligent, successful kids. But so she's, I think, the one that really hits that kind of American dream, since she really, she came by herself with this other family.
Well, it's interesting. On my grandparents were my great grandfather Egbert was a slave, and he lived to be very old. And when my grandparents also lived to be into their hundreds. They actually were sharecroppers early in the day, and they had 13 children. My grandfather had 20 children, but with my grandmother he had 13 children, and they had a farm and so forth, and they actually were connected to a family called the Longinos, and they're a big family in the South. And my grandfather working for them, and then he started his own business, and he has a landscaper, and he helped build a lot of did a lot of landscaping throughout North Atlanta and all the way down to Fayetteville. So a lot of the families like the Hudgens and the Longinos, he was connected to, and they trusted him. So he was that person that worked with them, even though he was a black man. But the odd thing is they also called him Mutt. That was his nickname, even though his name was Lovett. And so it was a thing he wore with pride, but also there was a little pain that went with it. So my family was pretty well off. They were the kind of family that hired other black people in the area, right, to work. Like, so when he had his own landscaping business, he hired other black men and young people to work for him. And he employed them. He paid them cash, and he took care of that. But so that allowed my family to maybe prosper, like to be like a middle class type family in a time where there was a lot of poverty. And it set up, most of his children were able to go to college if they wanted to. So it set our family on a certain path as a whole, the things he did and the business that he and my grandmother built. So the American dream was part of our story, even during segregation, right? My grandparents actually were the kind of family that would give to the school and make sure people had things when they didn't have other avenues. So me learning those stories and seeing my grandfather and my grandmother operate, I was able to, early on, an entrepreneurial spirit was embedded in me. And I think that translates even now as a seed to the way I approach my art business. I approach it as an entrepreneur.
I think my mom kind of she was striving for that. She left Scotland and said she could do whatever she wants in America. She could reinvent herself. She was a nurse in Scotland and moved over and became a maid temporarily, just so that she could get over to the States and do anything, work and have that American dream.
In a lot of different ways. My mother went to college. She was determined to do that from a youth. She was one of few in her family that decided to do that. She earned her master's degree, and then she worked at Georgia State University up until her retirement years. My father was in the military. He fought in Vietnam, and then he worked for CSX Railroad until retirement. Other parts of my family, I come from a huge sharecropping family on my mother's side, some of those relatives. And so my great-grandfather, Pompey Moore, owned a lot of land in South Georgia. But it got taken from him, which was a story of a lot of Black farmers.
I was raised by a single mom who did everything in her will to provide a better life than what she had while she was growing up. And so I guess the American dream is wrapped up into so many different components depending on where you come from and, depending on your family's background, income brackets and all that stuff. And so my mom wanted to provide a better life for us than what she was given. Being unstable financially, having to move and in and out of, different locations and schools. And she wanted to provide stability for us. So we've only moved 3 times, which is, for some people, that's a lot. But for us and my mom, that actually was not a lot. And she was able to do something that had never been done in my family, which was purchase a house to provide stability for us as a single mama with 4 kids. So it was quite amazing.
I think the way that my family history intersects with the American dream is really just, in myself, in my other family members. It's interesting. It's sort of an interesting phenomenon in my family that we have a lot of young female entrepreneurs in my family. A lot of us are first generation or second generation college graduates. A lot of us are first or second generation business owners, but a large majority of the women in my family right now are in that capacity. Like, we own businesses, we have college degrees, we found some sort of success. And large and in part, I believe that is it's a first for our family. So we're starting to turn the tide of generational wealth in our family.
I think that's kind of a tricky question, just with the verbiage of what the American dream is, because I think with that it's pretty different for everybody. But I think the intersection is just following intuition and following what a certain individual wants to do. So with my grandfather on my dad's side, it was traveling from Philadelphia to Virginia. Some of it was, my grandmother just wanting to kind of stay in the location where she was born and kind of staying true to those roots of the actual location to where they're from.
Both sides of my family really wish to have better lives, to have better opportunities for their children and their descendants after that. So coming to the Americas really became this opportunity for all of us to kind of advance in ways that we might not have in our grandparents' time. for me, this allows me to be able to reach higher, especially as an artist coming from the Americas. It's a lot easier to gain opportunities. It's a lot easier to work, especially being a female artist. In a lot of other countries, female artists aren't allowed to work. They aren't allowed to be artists. And so this just became an exponential opportunity for me to gain that sort of recognition.
Yeah, so this is pretty much kind of more so where the turn in the conversation happens. As I stated earlier, my mother's line was connected to the Kingsley Plantation. So how they connect to the American dream is basically by working in the fields and doing everything that they did as slaves. More so on my mother's side, my father's side, him having as many siblings as he did, he was one of 12. They relocated to Miami, Florida, and to be honest, they were all raised in one home. I mean, they all made it out. Father went on to be a principal, prestigious here in Jacksonville, Florida, and was pretty much known as the Joe Clark of Jacksonville, alluding to the movie Lean on Me. But how my family is connected to the American dream, I would essentially say through me and my sister. Just being able to have African-American children here in Jacksonville, Florida, and then be able to make it and succeed and have families. And most importantly, for our family, definitely have Christ within their hearts. So, yeah, I think that was their American dream. Or the dream period.